Welcome back to another episode of Sacred Wild Man. My name is Roy, and today I will be going into the fourth video of the series, Reclaiming Masculinity. Now the topic for today's video is owning your darkness as a man. And what I mean by darkness is that anything that is repressed. This is also known as the shadow, spoken by Carl Jung. And it often has to do with the emotions, certain memories and experiences. And with the emotions, they often have to do with anger, sadness, fear, and also this feeling of aggression. And it makes sense why we repress things, because they're uncomfortable. They were traumatic. And so we don't want to think about them. We want to try to move throughout life without having to be bogged down by these things. Unfortunately, that doesn't work in the long term. In the short term, it might provide some relief so we can focus and kind of take care of the things that immediately demand your attention. But often what people find is that the more you do not deal with your shadow, the more you repress those memories, those emotions, the more they begin to indirectly, unconsciously direct your life and also sabotage your life. Now, the shadow and the darkness is not equated as something that is bad or evil. It's just that it's something that is not in the light of awareness, not in the light of consciousness. So owning your darkness as a man means shining the light on those repressed parts of yourself. Because within that shadow, within that darkness, actually lies gold, actually lies tremendous amount of gifts and energy for you to reclaim. And so in order for men to actually become more powerful, more grounded, more centered, more kind, more integrated and balanced, requires being able to integrate and shine light on the shadow. And this is a huge part of reclaiming masculinity, is being able to own and face your own darkness, your own shadow. Now I want to give a personal example of what I mean by owning your darkness. And this is a story, an experience that still sticks with me to this day. So I do a martial art called capoeira, which is an Afro-Brazilian martial art. And something my mestre noticed is that I was pulling my kicks. So one day he kind of paused me during the class training, and he's like, "Come here, you're pulling your kicks. You're not actually kicking." And he was right. I was worried about hurting the other person. So rather than letting my kicks fully extend and actually putting some power, putting some oomph behind it, not to hurt the other person, but to actually let the kick flow, I was pulling it. So I wouldn't straighten my leg fully, and I would also kind of do something with my lower back in a way to lessen the blow on the other person. And so he pulled me aside and he's like, "All right, kick me." And I was like, "All right, you want me to kick you? Okay, right, sure." So I kicked him on his shoulder right here, and he's like, "No, harder." So I kick again. He's like, "Nope, harder." I kick him again. He's like, "Nope, harder, harder." And finally I kick and kick and kick, and he's like, "Yes, now that's how you're supposed to kick." And then he's like, "All right, so now let's play a game." And so we play a game, we spar, and he doesn't bother kind of taking it light on me. He lets his kicks land on me if I don't get out of the way in time. And obviously not to the point of seriously injuring me, but there was some oomph behind it. And curiously enough, it didn't bother me. I was like, you know what? I can actually take some of this. It's not too much and it's not too little. It's like in the perfect range of, it'd probably be a good idea to get out of the way. If I don't get out of the way, I'm going to feel it. But it did this thing of, it also enlivened me, of something deep within me was like, all right, yeah, like my eyes would widen. It's like, all right, we're going at it now. And I would let my kicks loose as well. And we concluded the game. He's like, "Hey, there was that one kick. If I didn't get out of the way, I would have been in trouble." And I just felt super invigorated after that experience. I think my chest was a little bit more expanded and just standing up a little bit taller. straighter and also just more solid. And I loved that experience because what it tapped in for me was this, what you could call the shadow or the darkness of repressed aggression. And the whole idea with aggression is it's not meant to hurt or destroy. It's more so this energy that's particular to the masculine of kind of being able to put yourself out there, create what you want, ask for what you want. And you're also respecting the free will of other people, but there is a go get it, go for it attitude, and you feel it more so than it's a concept. And so what it clarified for me was there was this part of me that was, we'll say, a persona, perhaps, of, I don't want to be a bad person. I don't want to hurt other people. Like if I hurt somebody, that means I'm a bad person. So I'm just going to take it light. I'm going to be very respectful and be kind. And then there's another part of me that's like, no, I want to fight. I want to test myself. I want to sharpen myself. And I want somebody else to test me and sharpen me. And that wasn't something that I had a lot of growing up, of having this competitive nature with the other people around me. And so when I experienced that, there was a huge rush of energy that then permeated into other areas of my life. I was more confident at work. I was more confident in just being able to look other people in the eye. And this was a huge benefit to my life because it unlocked a lot of stuck energy there that I have available to me now that I can actually direct into other aspects of my life. Now, as I tell that story, perhaps some of the men watching this video can relate to it. You might have had those moments in your life where you felt a little bit more in you, something stirring. It's like, yeah, I want to let this out, but it also feels terrifying. It feels scary. It's outside of your norm, of what's familiar, what's easy, or the path of least resistance, what is comfortable. So some people don't. Some people just keep that repressed, or they actively suppress it consciously because they think, oh, there's too many consequences to it. It's not safe, right? Even within our culture here in the West, right? Political correctness, being a nice or pleasant person. Well, the risk of being authentic is, maybe I'll get rejected, I'll offend somebody, and then I'll be canceled or have all these things happen to me, these consequences from the social norm. So we temper it down, or we don't say it at all. Meanwhile, it continues to churn within us, these repressed aspects of ourselves. So the emotions, the aggression, the memories. And I can understand that. That's a very human response to do. The flip side of that, however, that I want to put forward is, what are the consequences of continuing to suppress and repress these parts of you? So if you yourself as a man are aware that there are certain aspects of your life where you're not being real or authentic with yourself, forget about just the people around you, but most importantly with yourself, would you be okay with living that way for the next year? Would you be okay with living that way for the next 5 years? For the next 10 years? Maybe it's a specific situation at work, or romantic relationships, family relationships, or friendships. If there is already some pain there from not being able to express yourself authentically, is that something you are okay with doing on a long-term basis for the rest of your life? Only you know that answer, and only you will be able to make the decision of, I'm going to make a change, or I'm going to stay the same. Oftentimes, this is where pain is the helpful teacher. The pain of changing and going into something completely unknown, or the pain of staying the same. Now, the pain of staying the same, of continuing to behave and live and suppress and repress the way you have been doing your entire life, has many consequences. And there are certain ways in which we do this. And so I'll offer an example of some things that I have done, or I see others do, as a way of trying to repress and mitigate this scarier, darker shadow, this darkness that we feel within us. One of them is people pleasing. Did this for the majority of my life. Be nice, be kind, don't offend other people. In fact, just don't say anything. Just agree with everybody, right? Smile and be polite, all of that. Meanwhile, in the inside, there's a lot of resentment and bitterness that starts to churn and build up. And it has less to do with other people. I'm literally, mad at myself, but it's harder to admit that. Another common coping behavior would be turning to addictions. So these could be substances such as alcohol, marijuana, psychedelics, etc. Or this could be workaholism, right? It could be some sexual addictions. And the whole idea is we're using those addictions to fill a void within ourselves. And this void usually has to do with that part of us, that deeper soul knowing of, this isn't authentic. Did I really come here just to pretend and fit in and just to be nice and liked and that's it? There's got to be something more than this. And that pain cannot be covered by anything. And so when we feel so abandoned within ourselves, as we kind of hide our shadow, we are afraid to be authentic, then the only way to cope and deal with that pain oftentimes is to numb it out. And so that's where the addictions come in. Now, other people might take the opposite route. Rather than being the nice people pleaser, they might turn into more so a very domineering type personality, right? They're going to bulldoze everybody else. It's my way or the highway. And oftentimes that is compensating for some pain they experienced earlier on within childhood. And so because that's something they don't want to ever experience again, right? The memories, the emotions associated with it become repressed, suppressed. I'm not going to deal with it. No, I'm a tough man. I'm a strong man, right? I don't cry. I don't share my feelings. Life is about work and austerity and stoicism, right? There can become this very overcompensating, individualistic, chiseled stone, stoic type personality, and that has consequences with, say, that man's family, his children, and any other relationships in his life. Now, these examples of ways of coping, such as people pleasing, turning to substances, addictions, or being this bulldozing, domineering type personality, these behaviors are what I would call neurotic behaviors, maladaptive behaviors. While they served you at a certain point in your life, they kept you alive, and that's very important. That's worth acknowledging. Oftentimes we reach a point in our lives where they no longer serve us. And this is, in my opinion, what is happening for people when they experience these quarter-life or midlife crises. It's as if some part of their soul realizes something's off here. And their subconscious mind comes back online of, hey, remember all that shit we never dealt with before that was painful and sucked? Well, now's probably a good idea to deal with it because we're a little bit more stable. We're a little bit more in control of our environment. And it can feel very unsettling to be like, where is this all coming from? Or suddenly I feel depressed or something. I'm suddenly thinking about these old things when I didn't think about them before. Why is this here? And that's where these neurotic behaviors are beginning to become outdated. And our subconscious mind is saying, hey, there's something we need to deal with here. Now might be a good time. Now, if we clamp down on those neurotic behaviors, those familiar patterns of behaving, so this is who I am, this is how I operate in the world, and this is my identity. There's nothing else, this is who I am in this narrowly defined box. If we clamp down and double down on those things, what can happen is instances of implosion, so exploding and going within, or exploding and going without. A helpful concept here would be the term character armor, coined by Wilhelm Reich, who is the father of core energetics. And he described this character armor as those maladaptive neurotic behaviors. And they can manifest in our body in physical muscle holding patterns. So maybe we have tension in our neck and our shoulders, or we have it within other parts of our body. When we implode or explode, that is an example of when that character armor and those coping behaviors begin to fail. Because if you think about it, it takes a tremendous amount of energy to repress and suppress something. And like you think of it as shaking a can of soda, or that experiment where people kind of take a large 2-liter bottle of Coke, throw in a few Mentos, and they screw the cap, they shake it, and then they slam it, and then it flies off like a rocket. There's a tremendous amount of buildup of pressure there. You're essentially a pressure cooker, because it takes a ton of energy to keep all of that shit down, right? I don't want to deal with those memories. I don't want to deal with those painful emotions, right? I just want to be okay right now, right here. And you can only do that for so long. This is where a lot of the clients that I work with, and you probably know people in your life too, maybe you experienced it yourself, where they say, yeah, I don't know what happened. Like, that's not me. I had this flare up. I just blew up at my wife, at my kids. You know, I'm not this kind of person. If you ask any of my friends or my coworkers, they'll say, no, he's such a sweet guy. He's such a nice guy. You know, so I don't know where this comes from. I don't know how to deal with it. I just got to get it under control. That is the consequence. There's that explosion. And in the case of implosion, this can take the form of, well, suicide, taking one's own life, right? The pain feels too much to bear, so much pressure, so much energy trying to repress and suppress these things, but okay, I don't want to harm the people around me. I don't want to harm the world around me. So I'm going to essentially nuke myself to deal with that. And so this can create a lot of masochistic patterns for people. For example, cutting, and other forms of maybe less overt masochism, in which case I think workaholism can actually be a form of masochism. So you have these implosions, you have these explosions, and underneath all of that, there's just a lot of toxic shame, and it's very circular. The whole idea with toxic shame is that it keeps feeding on itself. And while we aren't necessarily consciously aware of these things, oftentimes it'll come out in sessions with my clients. Eventually, at some point, they will say like, oh man, I'm a piece of shit. I hate myself. Okay. Why is that? Well, it's not necessarily because they actually are deserving of being hated and are just a worthless person in their inherent identity. It's not the case. It makes absolute sense for a person to hate themselves if they are split within, right? One part is a fake persona to cope in the world, to be accepted or seen in a positive light. And then another part is like, well, damn it, I don't like it when you keep being this fake person in the world to try to gain acceptance, to try to fit in. Like, I want to be real, I want to be authentic. And so these two parts of ourselves are at war. And oftentimes, it's this other part of ourselves that feels a little bit more aggressive, more violent, holds more pain. That's that shadow. That's that darkness. Now, with all the things I've just shared, often this darkness and shadow comes to visit us when we least expect it. Also, when we're most vulnerable, such as in our dreams. One of my favorite movies and novels about this is a book and movie titled A Monster Calls. And so in this book, in this movie, there's this young boy. And I'm not going to spoil the entire story for you, but I'll just mention one part that relates to this whole shadow and darkness thing. There's something that he's afraid of facing within himself. There's also something that he's afraid to admit and to say out loud. And it's covered by something else. It's covered by the sense of, no, I don't think that. I don't feel that way. No, I'm the good boy here, right? This is what I'm supposed to feel and believe and think. This harder thing that I actually feel and want to say, I'm not going to say it. And in this book, there is this tree, this monster, humongous tree that comes alive and visits him in the dead of night, always at the same time. And essentially, this tree represents that shadow part of himself that wants him to acknowledge the truth. And the movie does a beautiful job of this, of capturing that feeling and creating that sense of here is a really big monster that is calling. This monster is calling on this shadow part of this boy to be acknowledged. And what was so poignant in the movie is that the boy says, no, I can't tell the truth. And this tree, voiced by Liam Neeson, repeatedly shouts and grumbles, tell the truth, tell the truth, tell the truth. And meanwhile, the boy's like, no, it'll kill me if I do. And then the tree says, it will kill you if you don't. And the boy finally acknowledges it under all that pressure. And then his whole body goes limp. It's as if all the tension, right, this whole character armor I talked about earlier, has instantaneously evaporated. There's no more energy to hold on anymore, right? He just has to fall apart. And as he falls apart, the tree catches him, almost as if letting him know, now that you have told the truth, you are free. And you're not dead. I got you. Now, this darkness, it doesn't always have to do with something that is negative, such as negative memories, negative emotions of anger or sadness. I feel, I can't feel these things. They're just too painful. Sometimes the shadow, the darkness, is actually a positive, what I call positive projection. Positive projections would be an aspect of ourself that we actually are longing for, but because somehow it felt unacceptable to own that part of ourselves growing up, maybe we got shamed for it, we put it onto somebody else. So one of my favorite questions I love asking people that I work with is, who's your favorite villain? Right? We all, for the most part, love to look at heroes. This Batman or Superman or Spider-Man is like, what a great chap. I want to be like that. And it's a little bit easier to hate on the villains of like, he's bad. And that goes to that splitting, right? The persona and this more authentic but perhaps pained part of ourselves. And so the whole idea of me asking people, who's your favorite villain, is to help them to tap into that shadow and a positive projection of that shadow. So, for example, one of my favorite villains is Venom. And the reason why is that he doesn't give a shit. He does whatever the fuck he wants, right? And what is on the flip side of this? Well, if we're looking at the positive projection of that, the flip side of this is my own repressed, disempowered self. Because essentially, we'll say Venom is the extreme of doing whatever the fuck he wants, but he is also not really cognizant of how it impacts other people, or he just doesn't care, right? And that would be on the extreme. I would not be going out into the world and doing whatever I wanted, even if that harms somebody else. But I have spent myself on the other extreme of, no, I'm a nice person. I'm never going to offend other people. I'm never going to ask for what I want because it could inconvenience other people, or maybe it'll offend them. And so now those two parts of me at war, the one that wants to be nice and people-pleasing, and the other part that's like, why can't you pull it together? Why can't you say no when you mean no? Why can't you say yes when you actually do want that thing, right? Fucking stand up for yourself. And that's where that internal self-loathing battle comes from, because these two parts are pulling in opposite directions. Now, when we can own that positive projection we put on villains or heroes or whoever it is, we can begin to reclaim that part of ourselves. So through watching Venom or other villains that I feel drawn to, like, that's a cool character, I don't know why. evokes something in me, I'm in the process of reclaiming that part of myself that I am putting out onto somebody or something else. And so it's like, all right, if Venom can do whatever he wants, how can I also, in a sense, do what I want? Not to that same extreme of harming others or creating havoc, but how can I actually begin to do more of what I want? Ask for what I want. And as I began to do that, I was reclaiming my power and also my masculine edge, this masculine core, who is solid, can ask for what he wants, is assertive, confident, able to set boundaries, say no when I mean it, say yes when I mean it. And this is something that every man must undertake, because the more you project these parts of yourself, whether they're negative projections or positive projections, the longer you keep yourself in limbo of being integrated and healed within yourself. To me, it is absolutely necessary for all men to own and face their shadow, their darkness, and to be able to find the gold that lies within, to reclaim that gift. Because for men to be able to better build, create, provide, protect, nurture, and love in the world, they need to know themselves absolutely. This includes the light and this includes the dark. Many men have repressed and suppressed that darkness. That's why it's there. And it will continue to dictate, rule, and direct their lives unconsciously as long as it continues to stay in the shadows. And it's not that these parts of ourselves don't want our attention, our care, and love, and light to be shown on them. They're actually asking for it. Anytime that we get, we'll say, triggered, anytime we get activated, something just bothers us consistently. It's like, man, why do I keep getting in these situations? Why do I keep losing my temper here or there? That's that exiled part of us that's saying, knock, knock, hey, I'm here. Are we gonna do this? Are we gonna deal with this? No? Okay, well, I'll see you next week, right? And it keeps coming back and back until we finally sit down and say, all right, you've been trying to get my attention. You got my attention. How are we going to work on this? How are we going to deal with this? And while some men might think, well, hey, if I face my shadow, if I own my shadow, my darkness, what if it takes over, right? What if I have no control over it? And in a way, I want to say you never had control in the first place, because that shadow is dictating your life down in the dark sewers, right? All your current efforts are an attempt to try to keep it under wraps. How's that going for you? Right? So it's better to actually face it. There's a great interview between Joe Rogan and Jordan Peterson where he talks about, he talks about this verse from the Bible, and he refers to it as like, okay, well, there's a little bit of a misinterpretation here when he talks about, the meek will inherit the earth. And Peterson kind of explains, it's not about being meek and, I'm nice and kind, that these are the ones who will inherit the earth. But meek actually meaning those who have their swords sheathed but know how to use them will inherit the earth. And Joe Rogan makes this comment about, have you heard of that thing about it's better to be a warrior in a garden than a gardener in a war? And yes, that carries that whole concept of you need to know these darker aspects of yourself. And this doesn't mean you are trying to bypass them of saying, I'm no longer troubled by it. I no longer feel it. But you're mastering it means you are fully harnessing the power of that aggression and not being consumed by it. Another one of my favorite scenes in a movie is X-Men. I think it's X-Men First Class, where there's this conversation between Charles Xavier and I forgot his actual name, but Magneto. And Magneto's trying to turn this big satellite in the distance, because Xavier's like, all right, if you already know that you can stop this bullet I'm about to shoot you with, that's too easy. Why don't we, give you a challenge? And Magneto struggles with that. And so Xavier does his little, mind thing and helps bring up a memory for Magneto that he thought he lost. And Xavier says, it isn't just pain and anger within you. There's also good within you. And it's important to remember that. And what gets Magneto to that level of being able to control his power is when Xavier made that comment of this focus comes from being in this place of rage and serenity. It's like rage and serenity come together. And in that middle point of rage and serenity is where that absolute focus lies. And so rage, you think, yeah, there's that aggression there. And serenity, there's this sense of peace there. And so when you can integrate both, that is when you have mastered this aspect of your life. The darkness, the shadow no longer controls you, but you are a master over it. And you can now direct that energy in your life to create, build, nurture, provide, protect, love in a way that is more integrated, grounded, and in the interest of all involved. Now, if you're a man watching this video and you're thinking, you know what? Whatever you're talking about, what Roy's talking about, I want that, right? That sounds scary, but it also sounds like it's calling on this deeper part of me. It's this initial call of the hero's journey. And if you're watching and you're thinking, I want greater assertiveness in my life. I want greater confidence. I want more authentic and real connected relationships where I can be vulnerable, where I can own these parts of myself that I have struggled so long and have repressed and suppressed so long. Well, how can I do that? Here are some recommendations that I have for men. Meet with a therapist, and this can be with an individual therapist or a group therapy setting. And if you're looking for a specific modality or therapeutic approach that could be helpful for reclaiming these suppressed, repressed, exiled parts of yourself, I highly recommend internal family systems. If you want to deal more with the physical body, core energetics or also bioenergetics, both of those could be very helpful for you as well. Second recommendation would be to attend some men's rites of passage. And there are some organizations out there, for example, Sacred Sons. There's also the Mankind Project. You can find more of these on my website. And this can help meet that part of you that feels like it's perhaps still stuck in boyhood, still stuck in this immature place and has not crossed that threshold from boyhood into manhood. We do need elder men in our lives. This is something that has been part of men, as long as we have known, but in our modern times, it is disappearing. Right? There is no initiation. If you look at my past videos where I talk about rites of passage, there isn't much of that anymore, right? And boys are alone to try to figure that out, and you can't really figure it out all on your own. You do need other people in your life. And so men's rites of passage, these men's organizations can be a great way to facilitate that. Finally, martial arts. Do something that requires you to move. Maybe it's powerlifting, or maybe hearing my story of capoeira, right? Fighting, sparring arouses something within you, this warrior archetype. This is what will help you get in contact with that aggression within you. And again, this aggression isn't something that's bad, but it's actually something that is very much needed in order for you to be able to live, build, and create in this world in an active manner, as opposed to a passive or passive-aggressive manner. That's all for today's video. I would love to hear from the men who are watching this. What in this video stuck out to you? Was there some particular thing that resonated with you? And also to hear any stories that you have to share of being able to own and face your darkness and actually finding the gift there, finding the gold that is there. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next video.